clears gradually, as though I'm walking through early morning mist that clears with every step I take. Before I can even see the place, I feel it, like an electrical charge through my body. For a moment it's frighteningly physical, almost paralysing, but then I am fizzy, like my blood has been replaced by champagne. I blink and the mist clears to reveal that beach, the one from my desktop. The colours are even more dazzling. Every grain of sand is a slightly different shade of gold, so realistic that each one seems to shift under my feet as I walk. And the turquoise brilliance of the sea, with white foam cresting on the waves, cools my eyes. The breakers whoosh against the shoreline, and they sound nothing like the artificial waves on Mum's relaxation tapes. These are too real to be relaxing, forceful and stroppy, aware of their own power. Now I realise, those are the sounds I've been mistaking for anger, the blood rushing through my head. Why didn't I recognise them sooner? I walk along the beach, courtesy of my mouse, though the movement is so fluid I'm hardly aware of it. I scour the horizon for people, but nothing interrupts the holiday brochure perfection, except clusters of bamboo huts on stilts, and what looks like a deserted beach bar, with a palm leaf roof a long way in the distance. The bay is enclosed by sharp green scrub-covered rocks that rise sharply upwards, protecting the landscape from anything that might spoil it. I have never been anywhere this breathtaking. I could so easily lie down right here, feel the warm sand mould to the shape of my body, the healing heat of the sun on my face. Then I remember, I'm looking for Meggie. Anger replaces that rush of pleasure. That's the first time since May that I've forgotten about her death. I don't think I've even forgotten in my sleep. So how could I forget now? So that's Sol Beach. It's the most beautiful place you can ever imagine. Paradise. And you know what? For guests in this very much last resort, it almost makes up for being dead. The idea for Sol Beach came from the tragic photos that we see whenever we open a newspaper or watch the TV news. The details of the deaths are different, aren't they? Accidents, murders, bullying cases. But the faces are what stay with me, of teenagers whose lives have been cut short, people who will never reach their potential. It's those pictures that bring home the effect that it has on the families, but I also know more than I'd really like to about how those pictures make it into the media. Before I became a fiction writer, I was a journalist. I was a very stubborn teenager who decided she wanted to leave home ASAP, and so I skipped the university thing and went straight into working for a news agency, Indentures, which was a really old-fashioned form of apprenticeship. Agencies are among the toughest area of the media business, and my boss basically made his money selling stories to the national newspapers and TV, which meant we had to be first to every news story. So I was 19, I was the only girl in an office full of roughy-tufty boys. We worked in Reading, above a chip shop in Cemetery Junction. Glamorous it was not, and I soon realised that this end of journalism was less about campaigning reports on drugs companies and businesses, and more about everyday sadness and tragedy. Because whenever there was a death knock to be done, my boss would send me instead of my rougher, tougher colleagues. The death knock involved going to the home of a family who'd suffered a bereavement under newsworthy circumstances. This was how the photos used to make it into the media. I was expected to knock on the door, apologise profusely for bothering the family at such a sensitive time, and ask if they'd like to pay tribute to their loved one in the papers. I was also regularly sent to knock on the doors of drug dealers, villains, general miscreants, but the death knock was the one I dreaded. Of course, my boss sent me because I was short, I was 19, I looked younger, and I was far more likely to get in and far less likely to be punched than my male colleagues. I was often invited in, to my complete astonishment. People would offer me a cup of tea, and I'd talk to mothers, sisters, fathers, brothers about their loss. The deaths that affected me most were those of children and teens of my age. I think I learned more in that 6 months, that first 6 months, than I had in the previous 19 years about life and grief. Often they seem to have a real need to talk about the person, and I justified the intrusion by thinking if I didn't do it, someone else would. Somebody who wouldn't take no for an answer, someone who would be more ruthless, might make up quotes. There were stories which weren't made up, of people going in and when the mother was in the kitchen making the tea, scooping the photographs off the sideboard into their handbags. So although those recent stories about phone hacking are of no great, they're very shocking, in some ways I'm not surprised. We didn't have the technology then, but I met some seriously ruthless characters. I did anything I could to get out of it. I would knock incredibly quietly or on the wrong door, or I'd try and think of another way to get the interview. The minute my apprenticeship was over, I left to join the BBC, where basically we wouldn't pester families. It was against the rules unless we, there was some public interest that the family really wanted to talk about. I could sleep at night again. So now we're back in the Facebook age, and I realised, looking at the newspapers now, that many of those photographs are lifted straight from Facebook. And it was almost one leap of the imagination to imagine a site where the whole site was showing pictures of teenagers living their lives at parties, enjoying themselves, playing sports, and yet they were living their lives only on the screen because actually they'd died. It felt gruesome, but it was somehow hopeful in a way, a world where those people could carry on living, could fulfil their potential, live the lives they were meant to live if fate or evil hadn't intervened. So that was the inspiration for Soul Beach. I thought I'd reward them by creating a kind of a paradise and giving them perfection in themselves as well, no acne, no insecurities about their body. But I also knew this paradise could only satisfy for so long. It's forever. So I wanted to see what could happen to them in this. It's like a dystopia, but it's also a sense that there are all these mysteries that aren't being solved. And that was why I chose to tell the story from the point of view not from one of the people on the beach, but from the point of view of a sister, a bereaved sister, who is invited onto this online wonderland at the invitation of her dead sister, Meggie. To begin with, it seems like the most incredible gift to see her sister again. But Alice's only purpose on the beach is to solve her sister's murder and allow her to escape from paradise. For a 16-year-old whose every move is watched by grieving parents, investigating not just Meggie's death, but also the mystery of the beach, is dangerous and all-consuming. She can't even be sure the beach exists. Could it be a hoax, or even the result of her own sadness, her own overwhelming grief playing tricks on her? I drew on my own experiences of seeing people suffering, but also of how I'd feel if my little sister wasn't here anymore. I also knew Alice could be no passive heroine waiting for things to happen. From the minute she opens the mysterious email from her sister, she's taking action, navigating a sinister but gorgeous online world, while she's trying to find out the truth behind the deaths, not just of her sister, but also of many other people, including the boy who becomes her first love. In my other life, I wrote romantic comedies, and it's been really exciting getting in touch with all these darker themes and issues, the things that I really care about, about taking a stand, about bullying, about intrusive journalism, about the weirdness of fame, and exploring Meggie and Alice as well. So I'm just going to finish with a couple of paragraphs from the point of view of the killer, and I promise you I've never created a character quite like this in my adult romantic comedies. The memories are fading like old photographs. What's left is loneliness. Every day that passes, Meggie becomes less real to me. There was something so precious about her last moments because they were just mine and hers. For many months she'd been public property, pored over and fawned over, and worse, by millions of so-called fans. And then suddenly, we were completely alone. But sharing a memory with a dead girl is not as good as I'd imagined it might be. For one cannot reminisce with the dead, and the details soon blur at the edges. Once or twice I'd even resorted to doing what the stupid people do, watching videos of her on the internet. They repulsed me. I don't want to be alone anymore. I crave company, someone to understand me as she did, someone to love. I've tried to fight it, but that same name, that same face appears in my daydreams and my night dreams. Alice. It ought to be enough just to see her, hear her voice. But I fear a time is coming when the battle against myself will be lost.